Welcome, my name is Kevin. I'll be your presenter today. I'm a medical student at the Mayo Clinic and I wrote the CASPer 3 times. So in this presentation, I'm going to share with you basically everything I know about the CASPer and how I got a perfect score 3 times in a row, or the fourth quartile 3 times in a row. And yeah, introduction about me. So me, I applied to both Canadian and US medical schools. I don't know if each and every one of you. So I took it 3 times because the first year I only applied to Canada. But the second year I applied to Canada and the US. So you have to write it once a year, or like every time you apply, and for different countries you have to write it again. So the CASPer is very important, and yeah, this is just me repeating the fact that you don't have to be coming from dentistry or anything. The advice I'm going to give to you is pretty broadly applicable, because I've had friends in physiotherapy applying to different programs, and when they talk to each other on the same day after writing the CASPer, they all had similar questions, even though they were applying to different things. And the CASPer is important. So for the people that are applying to medical school, you might understand this. McMaster, the way they determine if you're going to get an interview is like formulaic. Basically, around a third of your score is your GPA. Mine was perfect. Around a third of your score, which determines if you get an interview, is your MCAT score on the reading section. And I kind of did really bad on this. So if you're going to do bad in one category, you're going to need your other 2 to be perfect. So the last third was CASPer. And not only did I get an interview at McMaster, I got into McMaster, right? McGill also requires CASPer at 30%. This is from my last knowledge of last cycle. So it's an important test to get right. I don't think the United States cares as much, or the other countries do, but Canada definitely cares a lot. And it'll get you ready for your interviews as well, especially for those ethical questions. This webinar is meant for like advanced preparers. So I'm assuming y'all know the format of the CASPer. I'm not going to bore you with this, but ultimately there's 14 scenarios. 6 of them you're giving a video response. The camera's on you, you're talking to the camera, and 8 of them you're just typing out your answers, okay? And you're scored in quartiles like I showed you. A scenario or a question might just look like this. You just see text. You have 30 seconds to read it. Or it might be like a video. So these would be video scenarios. Something's going on, and then you have some sort of position, and you have to kind of come up with a solution. So now let's get into everything I know about the CASPer test. All right, I'm here to literally tell you guys everything I know. So there's 2 main types of questions. This is how I broke it down when I was studying. There's scenario-based questions and thought provokers, okay? So when it comes to scenario-based questions, there's, a text description or a video scenario, right? Some ethical thing going on. Someone doesn't want to do something, whatever. And the way I understood it is they're just testing you on a competency, whether it's your communication skills, your resilience. Are you able to overcome conflict? Are you able to be a responsible person? So through your answer, they understand your ability to demonstrate these competencies, okay? And this isn't like an official list of competencies. I just took this from the AEMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges, I think, core competencies list, because I thought it was a really good one. And you're going to need to use this at the end. I'll show you how you can use this to really kill the CASPer. All right. And I think that the best way to learn is by practicing. Okay. So I'm going to get everybody to read this question right now with me. You're a junior manager at a company that has recently merged with another firm. Employees from both companies are finding it challenging to integrate, with loyalty to their original companies causing rifts. During a team building exercise, you overhear derogatory comments being made about the work ethic of employees from the other firm. All right, so this is kind of like this is a scenario that you could encounter on the CASPer, something similar to this, right? There's something going on, and you got to fix it. Now, when you go to the questions that the CASPer asks you, usually you can predict this. The first one's going to be, how would you handle the situation in the moment? So let's see how you can answer this. A lot of people use something called the PPRJ framework. Okay, I'm going to go through it. It's a solid framework. I didn't use it, and I'll tell you why. PPRJ stands for problem, perspectives, responsibility. You guys can read. So that's basically how you're going to approach this question. First, you're going to talk about the problem that you noticed. In this scenario, I've overheard derogatory comments made by colleagues after a merger happens between 2 firms. This is not professional behavior and must be addressed. Fine, that's your problem. You identified it, boom. P, talk about the perspectives of the people and the different parties involved in the scenario. The perspectives in the scenario that must be addressed include the well-being of the workers in both firms, the corporate interests of the company and its shareholders, and ultimately the clients of our company. All these entities could suffer as a result of disharmony in the firm. Responsibilities. So you're always told like who you are. So here it says you're a junior manager. So you can say, as a junior manager, it's my duty to foster a positive and inclusive work environment, addressing issues that might hamper team cohesion. Fine, that's your responsibility. D, what's your decision? What are you going to do? Consequently, I'm going to immediately intervene, addressing the comments in a calm and constructive manner. Boom. Emphasizing the importance of respect, and later consider additional training or interventions to aid integration. So that's a beautiful, like, very mature answer. Like, not only am I going to fix it, but I'm going to think of how I can prevent this happening in the future. Okay. And lastly, J, promoting a cult is a justification. Why did you make that decision? Promoting a culture of respect and understanding is vital for the productivity and morale of the merged team, ensuring everyone feels valued and included. So this is a very solid answer. PPRJ framework, it'll get you very far, but in my opinion, it won't get you to where you want reliably all the time. And I'll tell you why. And before I start bashing it, let's look over the strengths of it. So when I talked about the perspectives involved, I talked not only about the workers, right? But I talked about the corporate interest of the company, its shareholders, and the clients of the company, right? What if the company makes, like, I don't know, medical devices, affordable medical devices, and now people are fighting within the company, and you're going to, delay things for patients who need it. So always think about very layers of the onion, who is involved by this small issue. That is a way you can really stand out. Saying that you will address comments in a calm and constructive manner. These words directly demonstrate your competencies. Remember that list of competencies I gave you? Using these words reveals your ability to show these competencies. And lastly, very importantly, the PPRJ framework always makes sure to explain why they do things in the J part. So that's beautiful. Now, the PPRJ framework, I think it's a good start. I don't use a PPRJ framework because different questions require you to focus on different competencies. And using this plug and chug framework, it's not going to make you stand out, right? Because if you think of how the CASPer works, you're not given a grade, okay? You gave a good answer. You gave a great answer. No, I actually do believe most people, if not everybody, is giving a very sensible answer on what they would do. People are not, the very small fraction of people are crazy and would just say something ridiculous. So I do believe everybody's giving a great answer, and an ethical one at that. But if everybody's using the same framework, how are you going to stand out against each other? Because the CASPer, you're ranked against each other. And the second that you understand this is the second that you start, getting the gears in your brain to work. Okay, how can I stand out? Because standing out in a good way is how you're going to get that fourth quartile, because everybody's giving the same answers. And I know so many people using the PPRJ framework that it's going to be very hard to stand out. This is the most important slide of the entire presentation. These are the 5 ways to stand out, okay? You either address more perspectives than others, offer more alternative solutions, and this can be like a creative solution, or it can be like a future solution in that you tell how you're going to avoid an issue in the future, right? Like, we're going to have training from the answer that remember the answer said we're going to have additional training. So that's like a potential future solution. You can be more personable than others, show your personality more, and use words that you would use. For instance, you can make more connections than other people, either to your personal life or to your future career, or you demonstrate specific domain knowledge. What this means is, if it's a question on like stress management, you could talk about a scientific paper you've read that talks about stress management techniques that is showing like domain specific knowledge. And lastly is to explain why better than other people. And believe me, people don't even explain why in the first place. So as long as you explain why, you're already ahead of the curve. As part of this presentation, I'm going to show you how to implement each and every one of these. Okay, I'm going to give you examples on how each of these 5 ways to stand out can be used in your answers to make you go above and beyond, okay? Before I do that, let's just see what the PPRJ framework did right. So we did a high depth of perspective consideration, right? I'm not going to go over it again, but that's one of the ways to stand out. It's way number 1. We offered creative solutions, like not only are we going to fix this, but we're going to add additional training and interventions in the future. And J, this individual that used the PPRJ framework, explains why they did things. They explain the rationale. So that's beautiful, right? We used here way number 1, way number 2, and way number 5. That's why this is already a strong answer. But here's what I don't like about the PPRJ framework. it's utterly redundant, right? In this scenario, I have overheard derogatory comments made by colleagues after like you just spent one sentence repeating the question. A lot of people do this because they don't know what else to write. And the thing is, when on the CASPer, you're given 5 minutes to answer 3 questions, or you're given 1 minute to say your answer. This is maybe like one of the worst things you can do because you're just wasting your time. And this sentence could have been another idea, another connection made, another justification, something that would have actually made you stand out instead of boring the reader. Also, look at this. The perspectives in this scenario that must be addressed include, I guarantee you sound extremely robotic if you write like this. Not only that, but I know so many people that write like this unironically. They will write like this and think like they just wrote the most amazing answer known to mankind. But when you read it, you know that they're following this like guide they read online or something. It's really not coming from their brain, and it sounds utterly robotic, and then they cry when they get a second quartile. Let's look at this answer. It's a very different answer, okay? It's the same question. In the moment, I would approach the individuals making the derogatory comments and calmly address the situation. Drawing from my experience as a peer mediator at the University of Toronto, I would use the I statement technique. I overheard the conversation and felt concerned about the sentiments being expressed. Our goal is to foster a collaborative environment, and such comments might hinder that. By not directly accusing them, the aim is to encourage reflection without putting them on the defensive. I would also remind them of the company's values and the importance of respecting all colleagues regardless of their original affiliation. This is a vastly different answer. There's no PPRJ framework, okay? Some people might think it's a chaotic answer, but it's really not. Let's see what this person did right. Number 1, this individual was highly personable. I overheard the conversation and felt concerned about the sentiments. So right now, you're being more relatable. You're being more of a human than other people, since you literally just said what you would say, like what come out of your heart. And our goal is to foster a collaborative environment, right? So you're really showing your values in this personable way. This individual also has a skillful integration of their personal experiences. So they say, and this is beautiful how they integrate this so effortlessly. As a peer mediator at the University of Toronto, I would use the I statement technique. So automatically, we're not even like deep in this answer, but this answer you can't see this answer twice, right? It automatically stands out because if everybody's using the PPRJ framework, then every answer looks the same. You know what I mean? But this individual, the way they started is like a personal connection, which is one of the 5 ways to stand out. So automatically, this is a unique answer and goes beyond. So this answer also explains why. For example, by not directly accusing them, the aim is to encourage reflection without putting them on the defensive. Beautiful, beautiful explanation of why you're not going to do something or you're going to do something. And a broader connection is made at the end about the company's values, the importance of respecting all colleagues, boom, boom, boom. Solid answer. And you can look in this go beyond section, right? This interface is from the brightdoctor.com, everything's structured like this. So go beyond, it will say, you could suggest, and this is for Ali, informal coffee chats or lunches to encourage employees from both firms to get to know each other better. You could highlight the potential benefits of the merger, such as shared expertise and resources, to shift the focus from division to unity, right? So these are also creative solutions that could have been part of this. And you can see how this is a more natural way of answering instead of, the problem is this, the perspectives are this, boom, 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 I am a robot. And I'll get back to that. Has anybody heard of the private conversation script? Okay, the private conversation script. In this scenario, I would like to gather more information, and I would have a private conversation with this person and have a non-judgmental tone. Who has heard of this? I'm literally not going to continue until someone tells me they've heard of this. Can y'all tell me what's wrong with this? This is actually a fine thing to do. It really is. Like, it's a mature thing to do as well. But here's the 2 things wrong with people who are writing this. Number 1 is nobody explains why. No one explains, why am I doing a private conversation? Why do I need to maintain a non-judgmental tone? Okay, so you just literally copy a script that you read online or somewhere, and you don't even explain why. Now, the second thing is everybody's saying the same thing. Again, the CASPer, you're scored against each other. If you have this one sentence, on your belt, and you whip it out on every single question, and you're like, you know what? I just killed this question because I use this like statement that like gives me a bunch of points. you're not going to be able to stand out. So if we were to actually apply that statement to this question that we just did, we would say that we would have a private conversation with that individual first, the one who made the derogatory comments. But this actually makes our work harder, because now we're going to have to say that, we encourage that individual to apologize, and then you'd have to say what you would do if the actions were to repeat, right? Because you didn't address it in front of everyone, right? Someone made a derogatory comment. You should probably make it known that this is not accepted in your company culture on the spot. But now you're going to have to go talk to that guy privately or that gal, and then make them apologize to the other person. It becomes complex. It's not a bad answer. It's it's a fine answer, but it just becomes more complex. And this is just like a pro tip for me. Like, I try to figure out a more fast solution that doesn't have like a bunch of these if and ands, if, ands, and buts. And lastly, you'd have to say what you would do if these actions were to repeat, which is actually a great way to go beyond. Okay, so you could apply this to the scenario. Like I said, it's not a bad. It's actually a very good thing to do. But here's how we can fix it. All right. So instead of this, in this scenario, I want to gather more information. Cool. And I would have a private conversation and have a non-judgmental tone, whatever. Here's how you fix it. In this scenario, I would like to gather more information in order to make a well-informed decision on my course of action and understand the full extent of the derogatory comments that were made and who they affected. Okay. And then you would say, I would have a private conversation with this person. Shania asks, quick question. We encourage to embed extracurriculars in our answers. You know what? Where you can and where you have the time at the end as your takeaway. I'm going to get to this, okay? You want to integrate things you've done, not because they sound cool, but because they're relevant, and I'm going to show you how to do it, okay? It's towards the middle of the presentation. But where you can, it's one of the ways to go beyond, right? Making a personal connection. So it's like, where you can, you do it. All right, back to this. I would have a private conversation with this individual and have a non-judgmental tone in order to make them feel comfortable in sharing details with me, and that we could have a productive conversation. So this is beautiful. You literally explain why, and it's better to have like 2 or 3 things that you do and explain why you're doing them, because this shows that you understand people. This shows that you understand communication, right? Just saying this is like, I read this in a book somewhere. Saying this is like, I understand why I'm doing these things, and that shows those competencies. Okay? And once, I want to just say there's no one right answer. So I remember Ali asked, this individual didn't talk about what they would do in the future. That was one of the go beyond ideas down here. The thing is, not everybody has the time to go all 5 ways to go beyond, because there's 5 ways that I showed you. And there's no one answer addresses all these ways, but you compete on all the ways that you can stand out. So if you can have more ways, then that's better. And my key is to practice, 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 and that's what we're going to do in this presentation. All right. And here's my approach. Like, I kind of outlined my thinking that I would do on these CASPer scenarios, and it would be to identify the main problem and why the problem is important, right? So this is actually 1 and 2 together. I'm not repeating the scenario. I'm just like very quickly saying what the main problem is, what the main thing I need to solve is, and why I need to solve it. And when I address why I solve it, I naturally, this isn't like a script, involve the perspectives, right? So for instance, in this scenario, both the mental, physical, the well-being of the workers at this corporation are at stake, right? They're being hindered, which must be addressed to ensure good corporate culture, mental health, and an inclusive environment for the workers, so we can be productive and thrive as a company for our clients. So really, in 1 sentence, you can say something like that involves the perspectives and involves why something's important. You don't have to repeat your responsibility. The question literally says you're a junior manager. But yeah, you want to mention your values, why addressing this is important, right? For the corporate culture, for instance. And when you talk like this is your time to be personable. Say like why something's important to you. If something would make you uncomfortable, literally say, this makes me uncomfortable or I would not want my employees to feel unincluded, and so on, right? This is your time to be personable, which is one of the ways to go beyond. This is what I call the candy store. Then I would stake the actions that I would take, right? What I would do, but more importantly, why I would do those things. Sometimes use an if-then approach, if this and that, fine, it's fine. And here's where you demonstrate your core competencies. You use those words like calm and collective, to create a comfortable environment, to show your competencies that I mentioned. And this would be maybe 60 to 70% of my time for each question. And then for the last a third, I'd go to the candy store, which is like, all right, I gave an answer. Probably everybody's giving a kind of similar answer to me anyways. Here's where I'm going to start standing out, okay? I'm going to see if I can think of some creative solution, right? Or make a connection to my personal life or my future career, or if I have some specific knowledge I can share relevant to some competency. So these smiling faces are where I would go most often. These are the two categories I would kind of think of after I'm done answering the question, so I can go beyond. But really, you can go to all five, and a lot of them, like number 5, it's integrated throughout my entire answer. Now let's talk about thought-provoking questions. Okay, a thought-provoking question is like this: consider a time you had to give up a personal opportunity for the greater good. And here's some more examples. Basically, it's like a general or broad question, often a personal one. Name a time you didn't agree with the supervisor or authority figure. What strategies do you use to manage pressure in both professional and personal settings? How would you optimize collaboration in future scenarios, right? This is like a lot of times, even if it's a scenario-based question, the third sub-question is this more broad one. And let's practice with this question. Name a time you didn't agree with a supervisor or authority figure, right? And by the way, if I'm flying by, y'all can stop me. It's just I have 80 slides, and I want to respect your time. So when I first started answering these questions, this is how I would answer them. Ready? So to answer this question right here, name a time you didn't agree with a supervisor, I would say, while working part-time in the evenings at a tech startup in the summer before starting my first year of university, I was assigned to a project to test the company website's backend. This part-time startup took place while I was doing a summer internship at a research lab, where I had the option of working remotely. The startup tried asking me to work remotely for my normal internship and spend that time helping out the startup. This is something that I felt was dishonest, so I mean, if you haven't fallen asleep yet, you're something special, because here's the thing. If I see you write this, it just tells me this is the first time you're reciting the story, okay? And for me, I wanted, I'm an honest person. I want to, when I'm asked about a story, I want to get the person reading it to be in my shoes, right? Because I'm this super ethical guy who made all these great ethical decisions, and I want them to understand me. I want them to be in my shoes, understand what was going on in my world. So then when I get to my answer and what I did, they're going to be like, wow, this guy is like, accept this guy, right? Give this guy a 4th quartile right now. So I really wanted to communicate all the details of these important stories that really matter to me. Now let's look at the second version. Last summer, this is the same story. Last summer, balancing a research role and a tech job, my part-time supervisor wanted me to falsely claim remote work for research to favor the startup. Okay. I literally just said the same thing in one sentence. That is not confusing. Because here, I guarantee you, 3/4 of people reading this who have to read hundreds of answers are just confused. They're like, what the heck are you talking about? What do you, like, I don't care, right? Quickly tell your story. And here's a pro tip. Last summer isn't even accurate, because it was actually the summer before my first year of university, right? This is a true story. So, but does it matter? No. Does it matter to them that it was last summer or 4 summers ago? Like, who cares? It really doesn't matter. What matters is quickly getting to what you did. So sometimes if you have like 3 stories that are relevant, but one of them is like just easier to explain, but the other 2 are like, so deep and meaningful to you, sometimes you might want to just take the one that's easier to explain, okay? And here's another pro tip. If you're really struggling on shortening these stories, which can be hard because they mean so much to you a lot of the times, just use like Chat GPT, tell it to shorten it for you. Of course, you can't do this on the exam, but do it like 2-3 weeks before. So you get a short version of your story. For me, like I didn't have GPT, so I just shortened them with using my brain. But if you're on a time crunch, you can do this. And to answer these personal narrative questions, let's look at the STAR method. And unlike the PPRJ method, the STAR method is actually a good method that I would use, is what I mean, because PPRJ is good too. So let's look at a random story, right? Not related to that question. Last summer in the McMaster Biology Society, while organizing a programming skills workshop for first-year students, we encountered an unexpected vendor cancellation, leaving us without crucial materials. Okay, so sorry, the STAR stands for, you talk about the situation, your task, your responsibility, the action you took, and what happened. So here's the situation. There was a vendor cancellation for a workshop, and you didn't have things that you needed for the workshop. I was tasked with swiftly finding a replacement vendor without overshooting our budget. Boom. Really quickly, I just explained the entire scenario. There's probably a lot of details missing. Who cares? Just tell me what happened in a very brief way, and tell me what you were responsible to do. Consequently, I quickly researched alternative suppliers, assessed their offerings against our needs, and strategically approached the most promising ones to renegotiate terms suitable for our budget. I used strategies like calling suppliers instead of email to ensure rapid communication. Okay, beautiful. You just talked about like skills that you have in solving conflict and solving, things that need to be done, and you show your communication skills as well in the action part. Now, what happened, right? You don't want to leave them on a cliffhanger. They want to know what happened. Ultimately, we secured the necessary materials under budget, and the workshop went on without a hitch, earning praise from attendees. Beautiful. Why can you use the STAR framework and still stand out? Because it's literally a personal story about your life. You cannot sound like every other person because your life is unique. So this is just a very logical way of organizing something that like experiences from your life and the actions that you took. But you know me, I'm gonna put in like a little spice in here right now because it's actually missing a letter. The STAR method is missing a letter, and that's the T, so it's the START method. And I tried looking up START method. I couldn't find it online, so maybe I invented this, which is the takeaway, the lesson you learned. I think this is very important. So not only do you say what happened, but there's an art to takeaways, okay? There's really an art to them. And this is something I think that I perfected, like my takeaways, and it's really what helped me stand out, okay? So I think it was, I forget who it was, that asked me if we should integrate extracurriculars in our answers all the time. Just put in the chat who was, but I'm answering you right now because there's two ways to do takeaways that I really like, okay? They're the takeaway, you either pick one, a personal story or a relation to your future profession. And often it's gonna make sense which one of these two takeaways you're gonna use. So here, the whole thing is a personal story, so your takeaway is gonna relate it to your future profession. As I pursue a career in medicine, optometry, dentistry, physiotherapy, whatever, I will continue to draw on such skills to stay collected in rapidly changing situations. Through strong communication skills along with problem solving, I will continue to ensure, who is this? Through strong communication skills along with problem solving, I will continue to ensure team needs are met for the benefit of my future patients. Okay? So this is a relation to your future profession that is very mature. It not only shows that you have a very beautiful answer, a thought out story about your life in this format where you talk about the skills you used, but you've also had the maturity to think about your future career, right? And the application of the skills that you demonstrate in a broader context of, medicine, for instance, or dentistry or whatnot. So this is really what's missing in the STAR. So make sure you have the takeaways, okay? And here's a pro tip. These two sentences can actually turn into one. Okay, that's a pro tip, whatever. But the key idea here is that this is where you get your points, okay? So the S and the T in the STAR method, you're just kind of saying what you're, like, that doesn't get you points. You want to get through this as fast as possible without, making errors or whatever, being confusing. Make it very simple. You should be able to send this to your friends and they'll understand the whole situation. Ask them to explain it back to you. And if they can, and if it's like they're missing a detail or two, but it doesn't matter, then who cares? This is where you get your points. This is where you spend your time. Okay. If you spend too much time on this, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Okay. So yeah, the art of takeaway, to use one of these two, and often it's going to make sense which one you use. Now let's go practice again with the takeaway, because I'm going to show you how to do both, especially the extracurricular one. Here's a new question. You're part of a community gardening group. Recently, a new member, Lydia, joined and has been offering numerous suggestions for changes. While some of her ideas are innovative, others are not feasible due to budget constraints. Some long-standing members are starting to feel overwhelmed by her enthusiasm and are considering asking her to leave the group. Okay? This is actually a scenario-based question, obviously, but we're taking a little break from the thought-provoking section just to understand takeaways. And a question you could anticipate being asked is like, how would you approach Lydia about the group's concerns without discouraging her passion, right? What would you do, basically? You can always expect to be asked this in a scenario. So, you give your amazing answer, right? I'm not going to go into the answer. Here's how you can do a personal connection takeaway, like an extracurricular takeaway. I saw that in the chat. Let me look through the chat now. Shania asked that. Yeah, so Shania, this one's for you. You can answer the question, and then you're going to say, moreover, every Sunday I volunteer at St. Joseph's Hospital as team lead for community outreach. Often, volunteers in my team disagree about courses of action, and I turn to the same notions of setting group expectations, reviewing budgets, and spending one-on-one time to address concerns and help St. Joseph's reach its community goals. So you can assume that this individual, in their answer, right, how would you approach Lydia or whatever, she talked about she would use the strategies of setting group expectations, reviewing budgets, and spending one-on-one time to address concerns, right? You can expect that this individual talked about these three things. And now they talk about a personal experience that they have that's relevant, where they use the same skills, right? They volunteer at St. Joseph's Hospital as a team lead. So this is a beautiful way to make your answer unique and to stand out with something that you've done, right? This isn't like the most prestigious extracurricular in the world, all right? This really is not. And this is something that is very relevant. So I don't want y'all to be like, thinking, oh, if I say I'm a research intern at Sick Kids, they're going to think, whatever. Think of the most meaningful extracurriculars that you can apply. And here's that's number one way of the art of the takeaway. The second way is a relation to your future career. So we can also say resolving conflicts within teams will be an incredibly important skill for me in the future as I work in highly interdisciplinary groups to provide team-based care to my future patients. This is like, wow, like if this sentence comes out of your mouth or it's written, I just think that you're a very mature person who really thinks through the context of these skills as they relate to your future profession and how they impact others. And the beautiful thing is, I probably use a sentence just like the second one in my CASPer answers, and I probably use it like 6-7 times, right? Because the CASPer is 14 questions, and a lot of the questions and scenarios are related to teamwork and overcoming conflict, okay? The thing is, you can use the same thing as long as it's relevant. You can use the same thing over and over and over again in different questions, because a different individual reviews each question. So it's not like the same person reads all 14 answers that you give, a different person does. So every time you say it, it sounds new and fresh and exciting. So think of the core competencies list that I gave you, right? Remember, this PDF is going to be sent to you so you can look it over again. And really think of these cool statements that either relate to personal experiences or your future career for each and every one of those competencies. And that's like the takeaway that I would do at the end of my answers is I would do one of these two takeaways. Or if I had a lot of time, I'd say both. I'd literally just do a personal connection and talk about my future career. And the way I think of it, it's like a fun slide. If y'all have ever played like video games, you can like, kill the evil villain, or you can score a touchdown. But you can also, like, on the way to scoring a touchdown, do a little dance, right? Showboat. Or you can use like certain combo moves to get like extra style points. That's how I think of it, right? Not only do you give them a really nice answer, but you give them a takeaway. You give them a personal story, a relation to your future profession. And these are your style points. Okay. And sometimes questions can seem overly broad. So this is a thought provoker. Reflect on the statement, we perform best under pressure. You can anticipate they're about to ask you a question about your life where you performed under pressure. Okay. You can just bet on it. So you have 30 seconds to read it and then another 30 seconds to reflect. So in that 1 minute, I would get ready to answer that. So sure enough, let's look at these three sub-questions that were asked. Number one is, do you agree or disagree with the statement and why? So here's where you show your perspectives, right? You make a pros and cons list. You talk about perspectives where it's beneficial to perform under pressure, but other times where pressure can actually not be the best, right? We don't perform well under pressure. So you can talk about both, and that's what gets you the points there. You could also talk about domain-specific knowledge, right? So I know a lot of you taking psychology, and you've learned that if you're very well versed in something, sometimes pressure makes you more sharp. It makes you perform better because you've practiced a lot and it makes you focus better. But sometimes if you've not practiced something, pressure will actually make you crumble, right? So this is an opportunity to talk about your domain-specific knowledge as well. Number two, you guessed it, is going to be like, recall a situation where you perform under pressure. How did you handle it? You're going to use the START method. Okay? You need to have these stories ready. You need to, and I'll show you what kind of stories you're going to have ready towards the end of the presentation. And three, what strategies do you use to manage pressure in both professional and personal settings? Right? So this is where you talk about your competencies. You talk about different techniques they use, and this is why you need to go through that competencies list and think about what you do in the context of those like strategies that you can apply. So that's like the meat of it. Now I'm going to get into my pro tips. Okay. Avoid extreme stances. Okay, this is very basic. So consider and acknowledge every perspective. This sounds very easy, but a lot of people don't do it. So for example, if you remember that scenario that I described where the company was asking me to lie to the other company and say I'm working remotely just so I could work for them. It's easy to just be like, you know what, screw the startup. A startup is like a new company. It's like a term for it. Like, screw the startup, they're just evil people, right? But think of it again. A startup means it's a new company. It needs work to be done, right? They're saving people. They're serving clients, customers, maybe patients. So they have needs too. And maybe if I don't help them out, they're going to fail. There's employees there, right? Maybe they're going to be out of a job, right? They really need me or something. So always consider people, even if they sound like the evil people in the scenario. Talk and acknowledge their needs, because that shows maturity. Also, avoid politics is something I'd recommend, because you never know who's going to read your answer. Number two, get your typing speed up. Okay, there's 8 typed responses out of 14. So if I'm someone who is a computer programmer and I can type at 100 words per minute, and you're someone who's typing at 20 words per minute, like this, with 2 fingers, then I'm simply going to get more ideas down than you. You can have the best ideas in the world, and you're just not getting them down as fast as me. Right? Sorry, I might even have like more like sorry, something in my lungs. I might even have like not even as great as ideas as you, but the fact that I'm just giving more alternative solutions, I'm explaining why, because I have the time, because I can type faster, it's going to set me apart. So I would aim for above 50 words per minute. I'm not here to lie to y'all. Okay, I want you to be at about 50 words per minute, and preferably if you can hit there 60 to 70. And 10fastfingers.com is a free, cool website that I used to practice. Tip 3 is to turn on closed captions. So a lot of y'all have seen my TikToks maybe and my YouTube. I talk about this a lot. But a lot of times they say someone's name in a scenario. They might say it once, then you forget it. Or they might not even say their name. And then you're typing your answer, and you're like, you know, the assistant manager or the lady in the blue shirt. And you're just wasting your time typing that out or saying that. And if they did say their name, it just shows that like you're unattentive. When you turn on closed captions, you can see everybody's name, and that also makes you more personable, because it's like not only are you giving them an answer, but you're using everybody's name, which is like just a more personal way of answering questions. Okay, so this is a top tier pro tip, I think. Now, say your first sentence with confidence. There's a video section on the CASPer now, starting this last cycle. And what I figured out is, you know, it's basic like psychology. I don't know if they see your video, but I mean, your video is recorded for a reason. So what I do I put on my best polo. I have my watch on. I put on cologne, right? They're not smelling my cologne across the camera. But I say my first words with utter confidence, okay? You have 10 seconds to read the question. And in those 10 seconds, I think of the first 5 words minimum. Usually, I practice so much, I can think of the first sentence I'm going to say beautifully. And I say with confidence, which is really just like, what's the most important thing to address right now in this scenario, right? And I say that with very confidence. And I believe that most people, they see a camera turn on and they just, they just get, these ahs, and buts. They're not looking at the camera. I'm looking at the camera, right? And if I have a good first impression, and then in the middle, everyone's saying the same thing, right? Everyone knows what to do in most cases. You're saying the same thing as everybody else, fine, whatever. You're explaining why you do things, good. And then at the end, I'd have one of those 2 takeaways. And remember, my takeaways are, at this point, not something I usually have to make up on the spot. They're things I've thought about, how different competencies are related to either my future profession or things in my life. So I can say those at the end with utter confidence as well. So not only do I have a great start, I have a great finish, and in the middle, I'm saying the same thing as everybody else, but I'm actually explaining why. So overall, I'm ahead of the curve because other people, they see the camera, they don't know what they're doing, and they stumble the whole way through. But I had a great start and a great finish, and that's really what they remember, right? That's really what's remembered, the start and the finish. And this goes back with my closed captions tip. The way I would take notes on the CASPer is I would have 14 flashcards that are blank, okay? And the second someone's name comes up, I just write their name down and I start like writing down their perspectives. So Jade, employee, has a daughter, can't afford to take time off. However, daughter is sick and needs attention. Okay, boom. And then, someone new came in, Marion or Golnaz, and I would just write people's names down. And during the video, while I was playing, I would write people's names down and their different perspectives, what they think, what they value, and so on. And then in the 30 seconds that you have to think before you start answering, I'd start making like connections. I literally draw like, this is what I could do. And I start thinking of solutions, creative solutions, competencies that I need to show, and so on. So really practice doing this. I recommend this technique. Have 14 blank cue cards. And when a scenario is over, you take the cue card, you throw it out onto the next one. Okay. This tip's not really relevant anymore, but if you're using a smaller screen, I just say to zoom out in case some of the text for a question gets like blocked off. So you don't have to like scroll. I don't know if this is an issue anymore. I'm pretty sure it's not. But if you're using like a small MacBook, then put on like 90% zoom maybe, or just use like a bigger monitor. Next tip, something I was guilty of at the beginning, is like, don't be a detective, okay? So have you guys heard of this scenario? I want to hear if y'all have. I think most people have. So a person comes into a toy store to return a toy, but they have no receipt, and they say that their son is sick. Yeah, so Azra's heard of this. They say their son is sick, and they need the money for the son's medical care. So what do? Right? It's a very popular CASPer scenario. Yeah. And when I would start answering this, initially, like before I started studying for the CASPer, I'd be like, because we don't live in a perfect world, right? I'd be like, how do I know this person's online, right? How do I know they didn't steal it? How they didn't just go to the back and grab it off the shelf and now they're trying to return it, make some money? So I would become a detective. And in reality, the world is not perfect, right? People lie all the time. People do shady things. So I'd be like, how can I make sure this person, does their child actually have cancer? Do they actually have a child? Whatever. But really, this doesn't get you points on the CASPer. This doesn't show your competencies, okay? The CASPer, it doesn't assess how well of a detective you are. So as a future professional, the way, you should be thinking in general is giving people the benefit of the doubt, all right? Showing empathy and compassion, and then showing your problem-solving skills, okay? You're not going to break the rules. You're not going to take that toy back and break the store policy with no receipt. But you could talk to the manager. You could look at charities that could help this individual, and you can, show your compassion, say things that you would say to them, say how much it means to them, and so on. So what you want to do is really hone in on your communication and all those core competencies instead of being a detective. All right. I think this one's straightforward once I explain it like that. Studying the evenings. When I was a teenager, I read this book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. And it will tell you that the stuff you do 45 minutes before you go to bed gets replayed in your brain up to 6 times more than everything else you did that day. All right. I don't know how true that number is, but I believe it because a lot of times people like study the night before a test and it works out, decently fine. Or sometimes you watch something, scary, or you watch the news before you go to bed and it's like, this guy got murdered, this car crash happened, and so on. And then you have nightmares at night. So this is why I don't go on IG. I don't watch news before I go to bed. And I study, so I get those patterns of thinking that you're gonna need for the CASPer just become ingrained in your brain, and your time is spent more usefully because you're doing it right before you sleep, and you go to bed and your brain replays it over and over again. Okay, so that's like a pro tip. Reconvene with friends. So I would have several friends, and I would write down my answers to a question. We do the same question every day. We do a different question. And we get together in the evenings and talk about what we said and just share our ideas with one another, okay? We'd be like, oh, you said that. Oh, but I said this. Actually, I don't think you should have said that, and so on. Because your friends, you have each other's best interests at heart. I never use these online peer platforms where other people look at your stuff like anonymously, because I don't know. It's like I don't know if I trust them, and yeah, I don't know. Like another person seeing my answers, how do I know if their input's valid? But when you have your friends trying their best and you share your ideas that you wrote down with each other, I think that's different. But although I've never used these, so I don't know what to say to them. And lastly, I'm going to say something, and because I'm sending you these slides, I didn't write anything here. But be cautious about consulting, okay? You can literally go on LinkedIn, look up medical students like McMaster to Groot School of Medicine, whatever. And you can pay some medical student like 50, 60 bucks an hour instead of paying this company, instead of paying them 300 an hour, just go on LinkedIn and find medical students. I offer consulting too, but I charge a lot for my consulting. So I do recommend just go on LinkedIn, find a medical student in your area. Yeah. So have your stories ready, these start stories, okay? So no kidding, you might need to have up to 20 stories. I'm not here to lie to y'all or make you feel good. I'm here to make sure you succeed. So have stories that relate to each of these core competencies. And the best way to know what stories you lack is to just do practice questions, and you're going to notice which stories you lack, okay? Oh, shoot, I don't have a story for this. And as you do more and more practice questions, you're going to notice. And something one of my friends did, who's in medical school, he'd have like one stack of cue cards with stories about his life and another stack with like these core competencies. And he'd grab a beer and he'd just like pick 2 cards out of random and make them connect to each other. So he'd make a story connect with one of the competencies, okay? And, I'm not recommending you drink alcohol while you study for the CASPer, but that's an interesting idea to just put your stories on different cards and the competencies and try to make them connect, so your brain gets into that mode. Lastly, yeah, practice with model answers, because you do learn something from every single answer that you give, okay? So I'm gonna do something quickly right now. We're gonna quickly demo something right now for y'all, okay? So let me just open a new page for y'all, okay? So this is the Bright Doctors interface. The Bright Doctor is obviously, we're running this webinar, and we have different question banks for the CASPer, for the medical school interview, and so on. AMC preview. So the CASPer, you can do a full length test, half length. We have 100 scenarios, all right, which is more than enough. That's like 7 CASPer tests worth of scenarios. And the way it works is, just like the CASPer, you see a prompt and so on. You're a manager at a tech company. You can fully get realistic practice, because a lot of people, they struggle with the timing, right? So now it's like 30 seconds. And if you want to rush through it, you can click proceed. You have 10 seconds to read this question, and then you can give your video answers just like you would on the CASPer. It's a beautiful interface, very snappy, very quick. And the most beautiful thing about this interface is that it has these things, right? It has these expert answers, because I believe the best way to practice is to not just, think of some things, but to also look at what experts would say. And I helped create this website in a very large way. It also comes with all these creative ways to go beyond, right? And that's like what's going to get you your points, right? For each and every sub question. So there's 100 scenarios, there's 300 of these explanations that you can really learn from. Also red flags to avoid, right? Because you don't want to raise red flags on your tests. It comes like that for every single question. It has these video scenarios that you can practice with, okay? So there's 10 free questions. I recommend you guys sign up just for the 10 free questions and check them out. But yeah, that's about it. That's the presentation, y'all. Do y'all have any questions for me?